it's like that old line about, a neoconservative is someone who was mugged by reality. These are people who have actually been mugged, Welcome to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM for Monday, August 18th. I'm Andrew Walworth, and joining me are Real Clear Politics president and co-founder Tom Bevan and Heather Wilhelm. She is a writer at the National Review. Tom, Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin met. They had their press conference today. President Zelensky and an army of European leaders are at the White House. Tom, it looks like Trump is going to insist that Ukraine give up the Crimea and forego joining NATO. But break this down for us. Are we any closer to a ceasefire today than we were last Thursday?
I think we are. I mean, the fact that, Trump had a meeting with Putin. Now, there were disputed reports on like how much got done at that meeting and who came out the winner and the loser. But nevertheless, I mean, Trump was able to get Putin to sit down, talk to him. And obviously now today sitting with Zelensky and these European leaders. So would be the precursor to theoretically a meeting between Zelensky and Putin that may or may not involve Trump. I think we're closer than we were last week. Does that mean we're close? Not necessarily. I watched Marco Rubio on a couple of the Sunday shows where he talked about some of the issues that were in play. And he didn't seem to me, reading his language that like a deal's imminent or anything. There's still a lot of thorny issues to get worked through. And there will be things that both leaders have to agree to that they will not like. And so I think it's still up in the air.
Heather, the Wall Street Journal laid out sort of two scenarios that they said that these were the two ways the war could end. One possible outcome involves Ukraine losing territory, but maintaining sovereignty with some sort of Western security assistance. Second involves Ukraine becoming a Russian protectorate, as they put it, with Moscow dictating its policies. Either way, at least according to the journal, it looks like they're going to end up ceding territory, which is something that the Ukrainians have fought against pretty hard. How do you see it?
At this point, I would say there's probably more than two potential outcomes, those being the most likely. But I'd say it's a fool's errand trying to predict what's going to happen at this point. As Tom said, the meetings going on right now are definitely indicative of some form of progress. But it's also kind of entertaining. The media coverage today was very interested in what Zelensky was going to wear to today's meeting.
Suit or no suit?
Right. The biggest, what's he wearing? And this is an actual headline from Politico that I'm going to read to you. Zelensky to wear military style suit to Trump summit, designer says. And he has apparently multiple designers. So one of the Ukrainian president's designers informed Politico that he's going to wear a military style suit. So you kind of feel like we're in the movie Zoolander a little bit. The coverage is pretty cartoonish. My own feeling is there's so much going on behind the scenes that we don't even know about, and I thought it was kind of entertaining. President Trump gave an interview to Sean Hannity after his meeting, and he said it was pretty funny. He was pretty candid. He's like, I agreed to this interview and I probably shouldn't have agreed to it because I'm pretty much not going to tell you anything. So that's where we are.
Yeah. So, Tom, speaking of the president and the press, Trump, not that happy with the coverage he got. He said, it's incredible. This was his social media tweet, whatever we're calling them now. It's incredible how the fake news violently distorts the truth when it comes to me. There's nothing I can say or do that would lead them to write or report honestly about me. I had a great meeting in Alaska on Biden's stupid war, a war that should never have happened. So he wasn't pleased with the coverage, but what did you make of it?
Look, I sympathize with Donald Trump a little bit on this. It seemed like everywhere that you turned was a report about how Trump got steamrolled and Putin got what he wanted and Trump was the loser and Putin was the winner and all of these reports that, to Heather's point, like, first of all, none of these reporters were in the room, have no idea what was actually discussed. Marco Rubio got to that a little bit in some of his interviews. of course, concessions were asked for, but he wasn't going to get into what was, that would serve no purpose to tell the media exactly what went on in these discussions. In fact, it would harm the discussions. But you just got the sense that the media was rooting for Putin to win, rooting for Trump to fail at what? Trying to strike some sort of peace deal, ceasefire, armistice. I mean, it's astonishing. And, I've been doing this long enough. And I think anybody who's been even a sort of passive news consumer over the last, few years know deep in their heart of hearts that had Joe Biden just had a sit down with Putin, that the headlines would have been completely different. They'd be talking about putting him on Mount Rushmore and giving him the Nobel Prize, for God's sakes, because he was able to have this sit down. They wouldn't have been reporting it as if they were cheering for Biden's failure and cheering for, again, what's the outcome of this? More war, more death, more destruction. It's like, it kind of boggles my mind. I'm not saying the press has to be, overly nice to Trump and sympathetic, but just a little bit of sort of objectivity would be useful, particularly in times like this.
Well, Heather, I'll give you 30 seconds to respond or what you're thinking about Tom's media rant. He had to get that out of the way. It's Monday.
I got a TM on that, by the way, trademarked.
I'm so glad you got that out of the way. And
Thank you.
I wish I could take credit for that rant, but it was a beautiful thing. No, it's 100% right. And another interesting point too about all of this, the American public is very split on what to do in this war. It's about 50-50 as to whether we should be supporting Ukraine more or less. So that's another little tidbit that should be worked into this press coverage as well.
Yeah. Well, Heather, I want to talk about your state. You're down there in Texas. Democrats in the legislature are coming home. They've been gone for about 2 weeks. They went to Illinois, Tom's state, or other places. Looks like they will achieve this quorum that will allow them to go ahead with this redistricting. What's going on and what happens next?
I just find it, and sorry, Tom, the best part of all of this is that they went to Illinois.
I know, isn't it great? So great. Love it.
It's amazing, and then you've got, Governor Pritzker, who to me is like a cartoon villain, talking about, oh, they're cheating, and it's like, have you seen the map of your own state? I mean, it's hilarious. So a lot of these characters are coming out of the woodwork. Beto O'Rourke, amazingly, is out there yelling about, he made some line about stealing a car. I think, here's what he said. Our side better get bleeping serious. When we win power, we have to drive the car like we stole it. I mean, that's a great, political message. I mean, they got to stick that guy. I don't know what he keeps popping up, but no, I think, what the Texas Republicans want to do is legitimate in terms of, how from my understanding, how the Texas state law works. And I think what's really even more interesting is you've got, Gavin Newsom coming out and saying that he's going to redistrict California as revenge for sort of this. But he actually, I think, can't do that. In California, the redistricting is supposedly decided by a nonpartisan commission. So talk about, breaking the rules. So there's the optics on this are not good, but I think the optics are not good for the Democrats.
Yeah, well, in California, what he's got to do is he's got to get it passed a vote which will happen next year, I guess. Right?
It'll happen this November. He's got to get a referendum on the ballot this year in November in order to get the maps in place for next year.
So we'll see if that happens or not. But Tom, one interesting aspect of this too is this, as they shrink the number of districts for Democrats, the Democrats are sort of now have to face off in these primaries, it looks like. And you have at least two incumbents, Lori Doggett and Greg Cesar, I think, are already starting to go at it. So this is sort of a follow-on or a knock-on effect of this. The Democrats will actually have to go after one another in primaries, bloody one another, spend a lot of money to win fewer seats than they had to begin with. I guess the same thing would happen, to Heather's point, in California if the redistricting goes through there too. But just a lot of effects to this thing that, I don't know if they're unanticipated, but they're interesting.
Well, they're definitely anticipated. I mean, we've seen this go on as states have in Illinois. When they redraw the lines, they invariably, when redistricting happens, they're invariably, combining districts and forcing candidates to make decisions about whether they want to run for a newly drawn district or retire or run for a different office, whatever. And that is certainly the case, as you mentioned, with Lloyd Doggett in Austin, which is Heather's hometown and the state capital. They've got, the situation. He was the first to call for Biden to drop out last year. And now I think he's 78. He's the dean of the Texas delegation. And you've got this young guy, Greg Cesar, who is head of the Progressive Caucus, right? So he's young and left and Hispanic. And you've got this old white guy telling him, well, you just go run on that new district down in San Antonio and, get the Hispanics to vote for you because I'm good here. I'm going to take, it's like, whoa, dude. And he's got $6.2 million in the bank that he's going to spend, to your point. Not what the Democrats, that's not how they want to spend that money. They'd rather spend it, on the general election or, in other ways. And so it does present a little, these are the sort of consequences of what this map, it's why they didn't want it in the first place. But yeah, I mean, the Texas Democrats, on one hand, we always knew that the story was going to end this way, right? That they couldn't really do anything. They could stamp their feet and, throw a little tantrum. But at the end of the day, they had to come back to Texas at some point, and they weren't going to be able to stop this. And that's exactly what is happening. Now they're back and they've got, thousands of dollars in fines. But in their defense, the stamping of the feet did get national attention and did prompt Gavin Newsom and some of these other Democrats to step up and basically take on this, join the redistricting wars that are now, they essentially, the Texas Democrats essentially started. And so Democrats seem to be happy about that. Although, as we talked on Friday, Andy, with Sean Trendy, was it Friday or maybe Thursday of last week? This is another battle that they're going to lose. We know how this ends. Republicans have way, way more opportunity if they actually go full blown, all the way in a redistricting war. They can add up to 20 seats across the country, net gain of 20 seats. So Democrats may end up ruining the day that they got. They maybe, think the Texas Democrats are courageous and heroes now, but in the rearview mirror, they may think like, oh my God, was that really a good idea? Look where we are now.
Yeah, Heather, should they have just taken the 5-seat loss and quietly called it a day? Because they have sort of awoken the monster. So it's like all these states are getting involved now, right?
Well, yeah. And I just don't see on a national perspective. I mean, you've got Gavin Newsom, who is clearly, trying to work his way to the presidency. I don't think making California more left is a winning message. I just don't see it. I mean, the people of California know there's a lot of messes going on in that state, and just leaning harder into this, we're going to do the opposite of everything the Republicans do. I just don't see the wisdom in that. It seems bizarre.
Heather, let's talk about D.C. for a minute. There's more National Guard coming in from West Virginia, South Carolina, and Ohio. And then you had this interesting column by Maureen Dowd, New York Times, ran on Sunday. She wrote about her sister's car that got stolen in Georgetown. And she concludes this article by saying this: even if Trump is being diabolical, Democrats should not pretend that everything is fine here, because it's not. So what do you make of the latest news out of D.C.?
Well, I think that's a pretty, interesting and almost hilarious framing that I don't know how the left falls into this trap every time. The right says, let's crack down on crime, and that's diabolical. I mean, this is pretty much an 80% issue. And I think for the people who live in Washington, D.C., probably even higher. I mean, anecdotally, you talk to people who live in D.C. and they definitely think things have gone off the rails. And so you see these headlines, they're arresting criminals, and Democrats are like, wait a minute. I don't see the wisdom of that in terms of political messaging.
Tom, are they just sort of like falling into the trap here? Although, and Maureen Dowd, to her credit, she thinks Trump is diabolical,
yeah,
but she thinks he's right on this. I mean, that's
right.
the message.
I mean, it was, yeah. And I know the columnists are not responsible for the title, but the title on that piece was awesome. It said "Criminal Fights Crime," which is exactly the sort of Maureen Dowd framing there. But listen, I mean, if you're a progressive, if you're a Democrat, if you're a liberal, and Maureen Dowd is telling you you're off the reservation on this issue, that should really get your attention, okay? Because she is exceedingly liberal, but she also, her dad was a DC cop. Her brother, who writes her annual Thanksgiving column, is a MAGA guy and a Republican, but she's to the left. And she recounts the story about, her sister's car being broken into and stolen, and then she had to pay $200 to get it, out of impound or something. And then she had to clean it and get it detailed. I mean, so she found her car, which she loved, and that's fine. But at the same time, it was a huge hassle. I mean, and this is one of those crimes that's not even a violent crime. But you do, to Heather's point, you've got all these folks arguing, oh, crime's not that bad, and Trump's lying about the numbers. Well, it actually turns out that the police officers and some of the members of the police force are the ones who've been lying about the numbers and sort of fudging the stats to make it seem as if crime has gone down in DC, when we've used this phrase before, the lived experience of the residents there don't suggest that crime has gotten any better. And in fact, in many ways, it probably has gotten worse. And we do see these stories now that people are seeing, that they feel safer there, and that the homeless folks aren't. I got a picture this morning of a corner from someone who said that used to be jammed with people, homeless people and vagrants and all that, like no one there. So there definitely has been a marked change inside of Washington, and in a positive way. And yet you have Democrats arguing that this is some sort of, authoritarian coup, fascist coup, and it must be stopped.
Yeah. Lived experience is the right term there. Because do you find, like, Joe Scarborough last week was sort of defending Trump on this, Maureen Dowd. It's like that old line about, a neoconservative is someone who was, mugged by reality. These are people who have actually been mugged, some sort of crime. And it's sort of interesting to see sort of standard issue liberal voices coming out. Well, I know this, whatever the statistics say, here's my experience. And it seems to me it's a pretty interesting phenomenon that anyone who's actually lived and spent time in DC knows in their bones that crime and vagrancy and homelessness and property crime especially has all gone up. And the city it looks worse than it did 5 years ago, before the pandemic. I mean, Heather, I don't know when the last time you were in DC, but that's been my experience.
Yeah. And, I guess the one upside of this whole episode is we'll always have the guy who threw the Subway sandwich. At
Yes.
Internet history was made. But it just seems crazy to stand against an effort to bring law and order to our nation's capital. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, Heather, I want to talk about it's back to school time. And it does seem like, to me, that school is getting earlier and earlier, the start date. In Arizona, early is July 16th. And according to the Pew, the most common first week of school now is between August 14th and the 18th. It's just goes against my grain. I think school should start after Labor Day. But what's happening down there in Texas?
Texas, it's generally a mid-August start time. And in my opinion, one of the saddest things is you see these poor kids who have to start football practice on August 1, and it's about 1,000 degrees and they're running around in their pads. And I feel really bad for those kids. But I think if you ran for president with the just two platforms, one would be school starts after Labor Day, and the other one would be I'm going to fix daylight savings time. I think you'd have a pretty good chance of winning. No, but I was honestly shocked. Starting in July, what was it, July 13 in Arizona? I mean, that's kind of mind.
July 16th, Arizona.
July 16, yeah.
Well, and one of the justifications they said for that, though, was to get the kids indoors during the hottest month, so they have air conditioning, so they're not, getting overheated. But it definitely seems, Andy, I mean, when you and I were growing up, obviously, it was Labor Day was the start of the school year. There was no, and we had all our, back to school shopping specials like the weekend before, and everybody go out to the mall, and mom would take you out and buy you your bell-bottom jeans and all that stuff, right? And now it's like my kids, I have 3 in high school now, and they're at 2 different schools, but 2 of the kids started last week. They're in their second week of school already. I'm like, this is crazy. I mean, it really did kind of sneak up on us, and it felt like the summer sort of abruptly ended. Usually you have the entire month of August to, and go on vacation. And honestly, if your kids are playing like travel baseball or something, the season doesn't even end till like the middle of July. So August is actually the time where you have, the family can actually do something. So yeah, it seems it's not great, but and part of this is they've added days for Thanksgiving, and they've added days for these teachers to have, administrative days and all of that stuff. And it just adds up. And next thing you know, the kids are going back first, second week of August.
Yeah. Well, Heather, we got a few minutes left here. I do have to ask you about this story out of Texas. More than 500 schools are moving to a 4-day school week. And this is because, and I think these are mostly rural schools, they have to do this to attract school teachers who are in short supply in Texas right now. I should say Heather's down in where you're in Austin, right? So 4 days off, 4 days work week, summer's off. It sounds like a pretty good gig to be a school teacher, but what is this going to do to our education system?
Speaking of rants, I could go on a very long rant about public education. I have some pretty radical views on this. But I think it would be extremely, first of all, I think 4 days a week is ridiculous. And, in that same piece, it was talking about how test scores have markedly gone down since they've enacted this change. And public schools are struggling enough as it is, but I would really love to see just like local DOGE type operations at the public school level. Because I have the feeling if you went in, did audits of all these finance, of administrative costs, people, your average citizen would be horrified. I mean, there's so many inefficiencies. The idea that you need to go to some sort of 4-day week because you can't pay teachers properly just seems a little bit bonkers to me.
Tom, you 4-day week for your kids? No. What about for the rest of us at Real Clear?
Yeah, right. How about 6-day a week? You get Sunday off. You go to church and play golf, and that's it. No, I agree with Heather. I mean, the schools. Meanwhile, Randy Weingarten, the president of the teachers union, is like hawking this book about how rewriting COVID history, which is an abomination to what they did to kids during COVID. And then also warning against like why public schools education is important, to fight off fascism and Trump and authoritarianism or whatever. But like in Illinois, I mean, we have horrible, horrible outcomes, and we spend probably more per pupil than almost any state in the country. And you wonder, like, how is that possible? At the collegiate level, you've got, millions and millions and millions of dollars have been added, not for the kids, not for teacher pay necessarily, but for administrators and for all these DEI and programs and the like. And so if we could strip away that stuff and, double teacher pay, fine, great. That's how you attract talent, is you pay more, not you give them little, well, we're going to make you work less and you can have a couple of extra, bonus days to lay around. No, pay them more. And where you get that is by making the system more efficient. The dollars are there. We've poured trillions of dollars into our public education system with not a whole lot of results. And so we just have to be a little bit, and that's if you could wave a magic wand, because certainly the teachers unions will fight, tooth and nail any kind of changes, particularly those that, make it less of a job protection program for them.
I think this is actually going to puts a little boost to the idea of school choice. I think that if you're sitting there and you're saying, oh no, now my kid's only going to be in school 4 days a week, I've got to take care of that extra day and all that sort of stuff. It's like, well, parochial school starts to sound a little better, I guess. Anyway, we're going to leave it there. You're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Tom and Heather, and we'll be back with more right after this. Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth, and our next guest is Martha Bayless. She's a culture critic for National Review and for Claremont Review of Books. She teaches at Boston College. She's author of several books and an old friend. So, Martha, welcome back to the program.
It's nice to be here.
So I wanted to talk to you today about cancel culture. Denzel Washington is out promoting a new film with Spike Lee. He was asked about whether he feared being canceled, and he said, "Who cares? What made public support so important to begin with? You can't lead and follow at the same time. You can't follow and lead at the same time. You can't be canceled if you haven't signed up," he said. And his advice was, don't sign up. So there's been a lot of pushback against cancel culture recently, including about this Sydney Sweeney Jean ad, where a lot of people thought that the left went too far in trying to cancel her. White House has gotten involved. In your view, is cancel culture over? Is it diminishing, or what's going on?
Well, I would hope that cancel culture in that particular meaning would be getting over. And I think people are speaking out more against it. Cancel culture is a term that was created to criticize the excesses of the race and gender ideology that exists on college campuses. And it came out of the college campus where professors and students were, either attacked online or actually called up before the administration and so forth. So it has a specific origin, but it's now, if you expand it to mean censoring other people, trying to get other people censored, trying to silence other people, then it has not gone away and it is not diminishing. And I think it's being practiced by the red state MAGA side big time these days, trying to go after DEI programs in universities by cutting their medical research funding, which seems like a sideways approach, but probably effective. And I think we're spiraling toward a kind of, sometimes I compare it to two people who are both lighting fires in the house and accusing each other of arson.
And so do you think it's, is it just turnabout is fair play, though? Is it that, when the left goes too far, the right reacts? And that's sort of what we have now. It's just sort of a tit for tat that's going on. Is there any hope that there would be a sort of a truce in this?
Well, I think it's complicated by what we traditionally would see as a back and forth between the political antagonists has become greatly distorted into grotesque proportions by the digital age, where all things that people say to each other get magnified and multiplied and amplified by the digital media and the social media. And it has a kind of grotesque size and weight that it didn't used to have. We all know, we could probably all list the various negative effects of social media, but this is definitely one of them. Mm-hmm. So I think it is different qualitatively and quantitatively than what's gone on in the past.
And you're right, because, culture, what gave cancel culture its sort of strength was social media. Without social media, you couldn't sort of, you couldn't sort of organize online to go after people. And the people who were canceled largely for what they did online. That was almost became a feature of being canceled. And I just wonder, is there any hope that we might be maturing as a nation and understanding this media a little better and understanding how it is manipulated? And that to Denzel's point, I mean, if you don't sign up, you can't be canceled. I don't think he meant you don't sign up for the internet. He just meant you don't sign on to this whole idea of popularity being, determined by how many clicks you have, and everyone trying to sort of be out there, one-upping one another to be outrageous in order to get those clicks. It's sort of invites cancel culture, doesn't it?
I'm tempted to say that Denzel, being a huge celebrity, right, this is something that's really quite unfamiliar to him, that he doesn't experience. He has no desire to increase the amount of attention he gets. Like a lot of big stars, he probably would like to cut back on the attention that he gets. So I don't think he's speaking from a place where he really understands the desperate need for attention that drives this. And when he says don't sign up, I'm not sure what he means by that. I wish I knew. And I have to say, in the back of my mind, he's gotten so much attention for this that it's hard for me not to suspect that maybe it's actually all a PR stunt to promote Spike Lee's movie. Because I actually hadn't heard about the movie till I heard about this. And now the movie sounds really interesting. So in that sense, it worked, because who knows, I may write about that movie. And it's a little bit of publicity for Kurosawa too, the Japanese director whose movie Spike Lee is building it on. So who knows? The funny part of it to me is that he also said, I don't lead, I don't follow. I lead, I follow God, I follow the Lord, and asserted his Christian beliefs, about which I don't know very much. And I think that may have sparked as much of a negative reaction as anything else, because you're not supposed to talk about the Lord, especially if you're in Hollywood. I haven't followed it enough to know if that was a factor, but it strikes me that it's quite odd that nobody says anything about it.
I'm wondering about cancel culture at a slightly different level, and that is when the government gets involved. And does it worry you at all when we see the president getting involved in the Kennedy Center, or asking about exhibits at the Smithsonian? Because I think cancel culture is a problem, but when it's a bunch of people doing it to one another and it's out there in the marketplace of ideas, it doesn't bother me as much as if the government is involved with canceling, if that's the right term for it. That's more of a problem, isn't it?
Well, I think the government has been involved. It's been involved quite a lot, and a lot of, not so much legislation as decisions made by what my friends, the political scientists, call the administrative state. All those areas in which the executive power is, wielded, which doesn't require acts of Congress, and often happens on a sort of quiet way. But the federal regulations for loans to universities regarding gender and safeties and all that kind of stuff, the government was definitely involved in all that. So I don't think this is new. It's just that it was more subtle then, and it wasn't, and also it wasn't quite as advertised on the media. But I do think the Trump administration is extremely clumsy and heavy-handed in what it's trying to do throughout all the agencies that the executive you can claim this sort of executive power. It's all being contested legally and so forth. But in terms of public perceptions, I do think that it's using a bludgeon when before it was using more of a scalpel. But I think the government has been involved. But when you come to the internet, I ask my students, do you know what is the law governing social media and governing the internet? And they do not. And that law, if I don't want to sound like a professor, but it's Section 230 of the 1996 Telecommunications Act. And what it basically says is no social media platform, although they didn't exist then, they just called them distributors. No such company is liable for anything that people post on it.
Right.
And it also said, if you turn it over to the flip side, it also said, and these companies may censor anything they wish on their platform, even if it violates someone else's First Amendment rights. It's 24 words. Look it up, read it. It's quite a little piece of law.
Yeah,
and it governs the internet in the United States.
It's called The 24 Words That Made the Internet.
That's right. There's a book about it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
so when the platforms want to cancel somebody, they can.
Right.
They can do it legally. And when it's just, I think part of the hysteria about it all is that people do not understand how this works now. What's the government? What isn't the government? What does the law say? What does free speech mean? It has really 150 meanings right now. Yeah. So I think people are very confused about it, and that really doesn't help because it just fans the flames.
Yeah. It's interesting, going back to what you were saying about the government involvement. And I think that's an interesting way to look at it, in that a lot of people, especially on the right, will say, well, look, just take the Kennedy Center, for example, or the Smithsonian. They were politicized, and the idea that they were objective is not true. They were sort of, not, the people running those institutions might be fish who don't know the temperature of the water that they're in or can't see the water, whatever that cliche is. But they definitely had a political and cultural agenda. And so a new political culture agenda, basically we're just trading one set of, to the victors go the spoils, all that sort of thing. I mean, basically, sure, Trump and his team should be able to do what they want with these institutions because that's what previous administrations did. And you're saying that it's more than that. It's not just that the culture, but that the previous administrations put in place rules and laws that sort of drove these institutions to the left. Is that what you're saying?
Well, that's probably an overgeneralization, but certainly with regard to federal funding of higher education, for example, there have been, executive orders and letters and so forth indicating that certain priorities should be emphasized, and how tightly that string is attached to the money, I think it probably varies.
Right.
But there has been a lot of pressure from previous administrations, particularly under the Obama administration, to, conform to a kind of
a DEI agenda.
The DEI. And I think that it's easy with the universities because they would like to go in that direction anyway.
Right.
One reason why it's so disruptive now is because it's sort of bluntly trying to cut off things that have been flowing along very happily for quite a long time.
Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. And for our next segment, RCP contributor Maggie Miller talks with Real Clear Investigations writer James Varney about his recent article on whether the Trump administration can break China's grip on rare earth minerals and whether deregulation is enough to spur mineral production here at home. Here's Maggie Miller in conversation with James Varney.
James, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Maggie.
So all of this red tape makes it seem like this is somewhat of a pipe dream to up our critical mineral production. Is it, or do you see the removal of some of these obstacles by the Trump administration as a significant move towards reducing dependence on China in the next decade?
Well, they are significant moves. I think the question will be whether or not they're able to develop enough momentum to keep them lasting after Trump. Because like you say, I think pipe dream maybe is a little strong, but there is a lot of work to be done. And if the political will to do it were to peter out, or if after Trump, the Democrats were to come back into power, they tend to not favor mining as much. So I think that they do need to develop some momentum on these policies in the next 2 years, 3 years. And then that might give them a chance of keeping it going regardless. And if that's the case, then it won't be a pipe dream, but it will be difficult. And it isn't going to happen in the short term.
So with so little of our mineral areas mapped, where do you see the greatest potential in our country?
I wish I could tell you that.
I guess they don't even know, right?
Right. The U.S. Geological Survey told us that they haven't completed maps like they should, or what we need of all of our territory in the U.S. But we do know that the the mountain range goes from Canada to Chile. Chile is already a pretty big mining country. So there is that spine. And, you and I spoke with some mining execs during the energy forum that Real Clear had. And they were talking about forming this kind of alliance with our allies here in the Western Hemisphere to make a sort of counterbalance to China. So I can't tell you right now, I can't pinpoint the exact geographic location where this stuff is, but there does seem to be a lot of confidence that we have a good supply. We just have to go get it, and we might have to bring in some partners to do that.
Definitely. And you just briefly touched on it, but I do want to go into it a little deeper. You and I both spent some time at the Energy Future Conference this spring, where we got to speak with industry leaders on this and similar topics. So let's talk about the energy future with regards to critical minerals. Do you see this lining up? Do you see this being, the step forward that we were waiting for? What do you think?
I think I do see it simply because of necessity. We talked a second ago about the fact that this isn't just something that we need for quote unquote energy, right? The Defense Department has things that it likes about this. The Greens actually have things that they like about this because the solar and the wind equipment is built around this. And so you've got various departments in Washington that all have something at stake. And I think that usually increases your chances for getting something done, right? If you got more than one party interested, then you're going to get more demand, right? And in this case, more supply of federal money. And that's really what we're talking about, right? Because, and we mentioned this in the story, it's kind of the flip side of the Green New Deal. Washington is going to have to spend a lot of money on this. Already, we've seen the Defense Department put $400 million into what they call MP, which is Mountain Pass. It's a mining thing going on in California. A previous story we had talked about some money going to a place in Nevada that's bringing out lithium. And we just had Secretary Wright out at the first rare earth mine that the U.S. has opened up in 70 years in Wyoming. So all of that, I think, indicates that this is going to happen, and I feel pretty confident about it. But again, the pace that it's going to happen on, I think, is the real question mark.
Do you think it's just because policy has been pushing in another direction? Why do you think it's been so long?
There still is this kind of stigma around mining. And obviously there are some degree of environmental degradation is going to occur. So I think for a long time, people just have looked the other way. They don't want to do it. We also bring up in our story the fact that all the schools that we had that train miners have just dwindled. We're down to about a dozen. So all of those reasons, I think, have come together to kind of make the industry dormant in the U.S. for the past couple of decades at least. They talk about a gray tsunami, I guess, in the industry, meaning that the top executives and the people with most of the knowledge on this have sort of aged out. So we can't answer that, right? I think as long as we do have a spotlight on this, as long as people are talking about it, as long as people understand what the problem is, it probably would make those kind of schools more attractive to students. And at a minimum, the dozen or so that we have now, schools might get stronger. I don't think we're going to ever see Columbia and Berkeley, who I guess at one time were the leading schools for this. I don't see them turning out miners, right? Because, they still sort of have like that stigma. They still got the lamp helmet and the sooty faces and hacking cough. So I think that there's a chance, but all those things are going to have to remain constant that need to happen.
So what are you looking at with regards to this? Like, where are your sights set, as well as what do you want to leave people with?
I think the sights are set mostly out west, right? Because I don't know if anyone, how many of our listeners or viewers have driven around the country, but when you're out west, it's extraordinary how much of the country is federal land. I mean, we're talking hundreds of millions of acres. And as we talked about at the beginning here, they haven't mined it all. They haven't prospected it all or gotten a very good geological map of all of it yet. So I think you're going to see a lot of attention on the spine of the Rockies and in the states around there. And then you will probably also see a lot of attention trying to develop better relationships on the mining front with Canada and with Chile and with these countries that have that, I'm going to mispronounce the word, but that cordillera of mountains that runs through the North and South American continents.
Definitely. Well, Jim, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
That was Maggie Miller in conversation with Real Clear Investigations writer James Varney. You can see more of Maggie's interviews on the Real Clear Politics YouTube channel and at RealClearInvestigations.com. That's our program for today. On behalf of everyone at RCP, thank you for joining us. We'll be back here tomorrow. Have a great evening.